Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, which is a part of the Recovery Housing Institute. My name is Danielle Gray, and I serve as the Executive Director for Ohio Recovery Housing. And today's session is going to focus on applications and drug screening policies and effective marketing. And we're really happy that you've joined us. And as you can see on this slide, this is a part of a specifically designed series of trainings that we call the Recovery Housing Institute. So if you enjoy today's training and you want to learn more, please look at our website under the trainings page, and you can find even more trainings that are a part of this Institute series. This Institute series is designed so that way if you take all of the sessions in the Institute and you complete all of the optional assignments at the end of the Institute, you will be able to have a completed policy and procedure packet ready for submission for ORH certification. And you'll also have opportunity to ask questions about the dwelling review as well as the program interview, and you'll have a really good idea of what the expectations are for your program in order to achieve and maintain ORH certification. So please do check out those other the other parts of this series if you're interested in that, or any of our other trainings that we have available on our website. And so just some webinar reminders before we get started today. You are all on mute, so I can't hear you. Many of you have probably joined us for a webinar before, have used GoToWebinar before, but just in case you haven't, there is a question box that we kind of have highlighted here on the example screen here for you to see. Actually, there we go. All right, you should be able to see the appropriate slide now. Yes, so you're all on mute. To ask questions, locate the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and that's where you can submit both questions and comments. I'll be pausing, throughout to take a look at that box. So if you have questions, please do put them in there. And also for today's section, there is one session where I'm going to ask you to write something down. We try to make these as interactive as possible and recreate in-person experience as much as possible. So if you have a pad of paper and a pen, please gather those so that way when we get to that portion and I ask you to write something down, you've got your pad of paper and your pen ready in order to jot some stuff down. And as a friendly reminder, you can there will be a survey that will be sent to you. It's not going to be on your screen for GoToWebinar. It'll be sent to everyone via the email address you used to register, and it's a Google survey. We do ask that you take just a quick second to fill out that survey at the end of today's session. That helps us improve sessions for future future attendees, as well as learn more about what you want to know about and what trainings we can offer in the future. And so today we're going to discuss three topics. First, we're going to talk about marketing and referrals to recovery housing. This is one of the top questions we get from new recovery housing operators, which is, how do I attract residents when I'm new? How do I get people to know about me, about my program, and not only get referrals, but get referrals from people who are eligible and a good fit for our recovery housing program. And we're hopefully going to give you some tips and guidance on how to get started with, marketing your program and building community relationships. And then next, we're going to talk about your resident application and screening process. So once you've done all that wonderful marketing and you have people applying to your program, how do you have a good process in place that, that helps you make sure that you're accepting individuals who are eligible for your program, who will be a good fit for your program, and doing that appropriate screening. And then finally, we're going to talk about drug screening policies and processes, and how and what the quality standards are around those, and tips and guidance for you in designing your program. So to jump right in, we can talk about about marketing and getting referrals for your program. And I can't emphasize this enough, but the first thing that you can do to get quality referrals and engage in appropriate marketing is run a quality program. It's just to run an excellent program. And I really like this quote that's here on the slide. Our success is directly related to our clarity and honesty about who we are, who we're not, where we want to go, and how we're going to get there. And to me, this is really the essence of what what your marketing plan should really be. It's all about just being very honest about who you are, being honest about who you're not, and being very clear on like what your goals for your organization, your program are, and your plans for getting there. And if you're running a really solid quality program, and everything's in line and everything's as it should be very easy for you to just be honest about who you are, what your outcomes are, and to share that and to share your goals and how you plan on getting there. And we do not have time today to really go into full details on very specific marketing plans for specific organizations. And you can get a master's degree in marketing, right? But there are free resources for you, and I encourage you to take the recovery housing specific information that you're going to learn today and use that information to perform market research and use that to develop a marketing plan as a component of your overall business plan. And so on the slide here, and there are copies of the slides as well as the Recovery Housing Development Guidebook in the handout section of GoToWebinar for you to download so you can get this link. There's a link right here for the Small Business Administration resource on developing a market research competitive analysis. And doing this market analysis can really help you learn about the needs in your community, identify existing resources, and perhaps learn who's going unserved or underserved in your community. And this is great for new folks who are just starting out, but even more established organizations, it can be a good idea to do this analysis and learn more about the existing market conditions, as the market is always changing and evolving. And so this is just a really good resource for you to use to see, who in your community might really need recovery housing resources. So you have a target population that you can serve, and that might be where your niche is for recovery housing within your community. Or you might do this analysis and discover that there really is no other recovery housing within your community, and you might be establishing one of the first organizations that are serving this population in this way. And that would also be very good information to know as you develop your marketing strategy and your business plan. And so when developing your marketing plan and analysis, be sure to keep the NARR quality standards in mind. And the NARR standard A to E includes guidance on marketing that leads to honest and ethical operators. And so specifically, I've got the standard here on the slide. The operator attests that claims made in marketing materials and advertising will be honest and substantiated, and that it does not employ any of the following: false or misleading statements or unfounded claims or exaggerations, testimonials that do not reflect the real opinion of the individual involved, price claims that are misleading, therapeutic strategies for which licensure and/or counseling certifications are required but not applicable at the site, or misleading representations of outcomes. Basically, this means that you must be honest, be clear about financial terms, be clear about services that you offer, be clear about services that are not offered. And if you're going to use examples of stories in your marketing materials, be sure that those accurately represent your program. So remember that quote from the beginning: we're being clear about who we are, who we're not, where we're trying to go, and how we're going to get there. And so I have a poll question for all of you. So give me 1 second here to launch the poll. All right, and so now on your screen, you should see a poll question. What are the ways people find out about recovery housing? And so just check all of the apply of how people find out about recovery housing. And I'm going to give you another 15 seconds to finish the poll. All right, so we can see here in the results that each of these types of organizations are ones that we've all heard of, that help residents find their way to a recovery housing program. And while each organization shares a similar goal of helping people with substance use disorders find and sustain safe and affordable housing, they each have different roles to play in meeting that goal and different strategies that they might use. And so if you're currently only reaching out to one of these sectors, you can certainly expand your ability by making sure that you're also known and building relationships with other types of organizations. So if you're currently really only reaching out to treatment centers, maybe you might want to consider reaching out to reentry programs or recovery community organizations, or just the general public, through word of mouth, and and really using the larger recovery community as a way to connect with others. And so during the 2021 environmental scan process, researchers interviewed recovery housing residents. And when residents were asked about how they found out about recovery housing, a vast majority of them stated that it was through word of mouth. And they found out about recovery housing from their family, friends, or other sources. So they may have learned about recovery housing in general from like a treatment provider or specific program, but when they were looking to specifically choose a program and move into a program, and they wanted a quality program, they really relied on, family, friends, other people in recovery that they knew, to let them know, like, hey, here's this recovery housing program that I want to be able to go to. And so certainly people find their way to recovery housing from treatment centers, reentry programs, recovery organizations, and housing programs. So it's certainly important to develop relationships and partnerships with these organizations. However, it is also a good idea to expand your reach beyond types that we think of as quote unquote typical organizations that work with people in recovery. So consider also joining your local chambers of commerce, your local business associations. These are leaders in the community. And we know that the addiction crisis has also impacted local businesses, and they may have employees, business owners, or others who are either in need of help themselves or have family or friends who need help. When someone is desperate for services, they are contacting everyone and anyone that they know for help. And someone may have an issue at work, and a fellow coworker or friend might be able to tell them about your organization. Having relationships with these business organizations can also help you later when you're seeking employment opportunities for your residents. Also consider fraternal organizations, churches, food pantries. These organizations often get calls for requests for services that they can't provide, including interest in housing and/or recovery housing. They may be able to refer people to your organization who they might believe are a good fit for your program. Okay, so now is the time for you to get out your pad of paper and your pencil. And so I want you to write down the names of 3 organizations in your community that you would like to make contact with. So considering those lists earlier of, the quote unquote typical folks that we think about, including treatment centers, reentry programs, recovery community organizations, but also broadening our thinking to also thinking about local community organizations, churches, food pantries, other social service organizations. And so thinking about that, write down the names of 3 organizations in your community that you would like to make contact with. And I would recommend being specific, because I will want you to actually reach out to these folks after this webinar is over and to talk to them later. So, so be specific. Think about, instead of saying church, think about a specific church within the community that does a lot of work and that may be helpful to your organization. And after you're done writing them down on your piece of paper, so you have them to hold and to keep forever, please also share one example of someone you're going to reach out to within the chat. So that way, I can announce these out for other people, and we can kind of brainstorm and come up with more ideas later so everyone can grow their lists. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to brainstorm and to write these ideas down. And then again, please also put one in the chat so that way I can announce it to the group. Okay, so we've got some great suggestions here in the chat, so you can feel free to jot down. Somebody said the Good Neighbors Food Pantry in their community. Someone else said St. Vincent de Paul. I know there are St. Vincent de Paul groups and associations across the state, so that might be something for everyone to consider, looking up their local Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Somebody said their AHOP church. Someone else said Catch Court, the Franklin County Municipal Program. There are other drug courts and other specialty dockets throughout the state, so that might be an idea for everyone across the state to look up their particular specialty dockets and reach out to those. The local CPS board, the West Ohio Community Action Partners, that's an example of a community action agency. There's a community action agency that serves regionally throughout the state. So you can certainly reach out to your local community action agency. Someone else said the court, specifically the probation department, local United Way, the local Salvation Army. Those are all great suggestions. Marion Lifelink Community Church, the specific church in Marion. The Board of Developmental Disabilities, or subclinics. I'm not sure what subclinics are, but if that makes sense to you, if you have those in your community, those might also be good places to reach out. And then also, somebody put in specific MAT providers, Ashland Health and Wellness Clinic. But for everyone on the webinar today, think about reaching out to your local MAT providers, seeing who those are in your community and reaching out to them. So thank you. So hopefully you all have a list of a few organizations that you've brainstormed that you want to reach out to, that maybe you currently don't have a partnership with, but you want to reach out to them and just tell them who you are, what services and programs you offer, and connect with them. So now that you know who to reach out to, you may also wish to generate some marketing materials to help you explain who you are and what you do to these contacts. And so just some general tips for marketing include, know your audience. If you're reaching out to a business group, they may not be familiar with the language of recovery or with what recovery housing is. They may confuse you with a treatment center, a homeless shelter, or some other type of program. So avoid using jargon and terms that others might misinterpret or misunderstand. It's especially true for acronyms. Like for many of us, we know about certain acronyms and who they are and what they mean. But if you're reaching out to somebody who might not necessarily already be familiar with recovery housing and the programming, they may not know all the acronyms. So certainly be careful to avoid using those as much as you can in your materials. Next, establish a website. Only using Facebook or other social media programs as your website might seem like a good idea because it's free or very low cost, but not everyone these days has those specific accounts. Many people don't have Facebook accounts for varieties of reasons. And if someone is searching to learn more about your organization and does not see a website, our default is to think that they're not a quote unquote real organization, or that your organization lacks experience and appropriate infrastructure. It's not necessarily a fair assessment, I get that, but I know a lot of people might, Google you, search for you on the internet, and if all they see is a Facebook page, they might pause and be like, oh, does this organization really have the infrastructure built up that they might expect in order to partner with someone? And they might not choose to work with you because you don't seem established. And we all know too that recovery housing, and I get that it's extremely unfair. Recovery homes have reputations in certain communities for having these, pop-up organizations that pop up overnight and then shut down. And we know that there's probably no one on this webinar that does that, but we need to be aware that that might be the perception and the stigma that's out there, so that when we make decisions about our forward-facing selves into the community, that we're dispelling those myths and we are setting ourselves apart from any bad actors in the community. So there are many low-cost options for a basic website. They include Squarespace, Wix, and WordPress. And many of these come with templates and tools, so you can have a basic website without being a graphic designer or having to make major investments. And having this independent website can help you demonstrate that you're a professional organization and that you're ready to be taken seriously. And this is also something too, a tip that we've gotten from different organizations is some organizations have worked with local scouting organizations, such as, your Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. They often have students or those who need to do specific projects in order to earn badges or awards within that organization, or local high schools or colleges might have programs where they require community service. And so having someone from a local college volunteer to help you with your website and help you, post things to the website and create the website for you might be a really great way to partner and to take advantage of local resources if that's not something, that knowledge and capacity that you have. But of course, it doesn't need to be an elaborate website. It could be just be something very simple that is out there that just shows the community when they search for you online that you are a legitimate organization. And then on all of your marketing materials, make sure your contact information is easily spotted and accurate. And the point is to get people to contact you and learn more about you in real life. So make sure your phone number or email address is easily seen. And in that regard, establish a professional email address. Again, similar to having a website, having a professional email address communicates to others that you're an established and professional organization. So look into having, an email that's other than a Gmail account or, or a Yahoo account or anything like that, so your email would be, your name at business organization. Again, there's low cost ways to do that. And it just, again, it makes you, you put forward a professional footing and that this is a business that you're running, this is an organization that you're running. It's not you personally, doing all of this work, but you are a part of this professional organization. And having that, professional email and a phone system that is for your business, certainly puts that forward to the community. So I would also recommend that when you establish that professional phone number, don't share that phone number with other businesses, organizations, or use your personal number. So if people call you and there's a voicemail, it's a voicemail for your recovery housing. It's not a voicemail for another business that you also work for, or it's not your personal voicemail. Just so that way, again, people know that they're working with a professional business and it's not just an individual. I also recommend getting business cards printed. There's certainly low-cost services such as Vistaprint, or you can make your own using templates online. Even though it seems very old school, handing out business cards is still a way that people make connections and get contact information. And so giving someone your business card encourages them to give you theirs, and then you have their contact information as well, so you can follow up. So again, it's not just about giving out your information, but it's a great way to share someone with your card and then say, oh, do you have a card as well? Or they can write their information on the back of your card. It's just a great way for you to start collecting contacts and networking. And then ensure consistency across all of your materials. So refer to your home by the same name, use the same colors and images and logo across all materials. This helps people easily recognize your organization over time and know that any materials or such things that are put out are from you and are from your organization. And so be careful about using images. First, be sure to get appropriate consent. So talk to an attorney to ensure you have appropriate ways of getting and documenting consent based on the specific types of images that you're using for specific purposes, if those images involve people. So if you're using images from real people, talk to an attorney about getting that consent. And then finally, think critically about posting identifiable images of your recovery home. You may have residents living in the home where they do not want to be easily found, or neighbors who may get upset if they realize that a particular property is a recovery home and they didn't know about it previously. So think carefully before posting such images on the internet or social media. I get the sense, definitely get the sense that you want to show people how great and beautiful the home is, but think about ways that you can do that where it's not necessarily, people are going to look at the materials and know, like, oh wait, that's the house at 123 Main Street. Just to protect resident privacy and to keep up those good neighbor relations. And then carefully review your materials to ensure that you are describing your program accurately. Especially for outreach to those in your community who may not understand recovery housing, be very clear about your program. Be clear about any eligibility requirements. So for example, if your home only serves women, be sure that that is clearly stated so people don't become frustrated when they call you looking for housing for men. Be clear about your target audience and specifically mention that you're serving people in recovery to avoid getting referrals from people who may think that you are an emergency shelter or other types of emergency housing where they may not necessarily be a person in recovery, but they're just looking for housing. And also include information about costs. Do not give the impression that your program is completely free if residents are expected to pay a fee. If you do offer subsidies or scholarships, let people know that they must apply for these or meet specific criteria in order to get a scholarship or subsidy. So that will certainly help you out in the long run as well. You can let people know that there are scholarships or subsidies available and they must be applied for folks who are eligible. You can say something as general as that, but just don't give the impression that your program is free for everyone if that's not the case, if there are certain eligibility criteria they need to meet in order to get those scholarships or subsidies. And then keep in mind that increasing your outreach may be a double-edged sword. You may get more referrals to your organization, but you do want to do what you can to help them be quality referrals from people you'll be able to serve and that fit your mission. So again, just being very clear about what your program is, who you're able to serve, can really help you not only get referrals, but also get get referrals that meet your criteria and that are serving your target audience and your target population. And to build that positive reputation and have great marketing that's in line with the standard, it's important to collect data and outcomes about your program. And I know for many of you, you might be brand new to this and just looking to get started, and that's great. And that is the perfect time for you to think about integrating, collecting data for outcomes measurement within your program. Even if you don't have any residents yet, making a plan to collect outcomes for the future is really important. If you collect good data, you can make accurate statements in your marketing that are backed up by facts. And you can even get really specific and target your marketing to your target population. So if you don't already, now is a great time to start collecting data, not only for use for quality improvement, grants, and other purposes, but also for ethical marketing. And for example, if you collect good data, you can be honest about how many people you help each year and provide accurate information about how you help them. So for example, how many people did you help find a job? How many people increased their income as a result of living in the recovery home? How many people did you help navigate criminal justice systems and resolve their criminal justice issues? Knowing this information and sharing it can be an effective part of your marketing plan. It lets others know you care about the outcomes of individuals who live in your home and that you are making sure that your program works. You can also know that the claims that you are making are honest because they are backed by real data. You can collect stories as well as numbers. ORH offers free tools to help you collect this data. A training on these tools is outside the scope of today's presentation, but you can sign up for the next training on our website. We have both live trainings as well as a self-paced training, so that way you can get started using the tools. And that information is all available on our website. And I'm just gonna pause for a moment here. Somebody said that they cannot hear me, so I am going to turn up my microphone a bit, but I would suggest if you can't hear, maybe turn up your speaker volume. I've got my microphone all the way up on my end, so, all right. Yeah, certainly if you have issues like that, put them in the question box and I'll try to address them as we go on. So when using resident stories, be sure to get appropriate permission to do so. Laws can vary depending on how you are intending to use a particular story, so we certainly advise that you seek legal counsel on getting an appropriate release for information that is appropriate for marketing purposes. And even if you have a release of information, it's a good idea to avoid using names and direct images of particular people. There's still much discrimination against people with substance use disorders. And while it's unfortunate, sometimes people in early recovery don't understand that they can be discriminated against in the future. So while you may have permission to use their image and story, many recovery house home operators choose to only share general information and stories and not use names or direct images whenever possible to help protect privacy and help protect that resident from future potential discrimination. Also use the stories of former residents. Using stories of current residents can cause conflicts within the home, perhaps an appearance of preferences. Additionally, that person's story may change while they're still living with you, and you may not want to use their story in the future. But if using former residents, their story is still continuing, but their part of their story that's with you has concluded. And so be sure the story is representative of your program. And sometimes residents do achieve amazing things. You can certainly have a resident who lives with you for 2 months, is able to get their kids back, finishes college and starts their own business, and now is some sort of millionaire somewhere. That is an amazing story. But I would imagine that it's not typical. Typically, people live in recovery housing for longer. It takes them a little bit longer to get established, and they may not become millionaires in the end. So sharing that story in your marketing may give people a false impression about what they can expect when they're living in recovery housing. So share stories that are typical and what happens in your home to help people have an accurate idea of your program and what typically happens. And when you're developing your actual marketing materials, there are free and low-cost options to help you. You do not need to be a graphic designer to create simple tools. There are websites like Canva, Easel, and Venngage that can help you create great basic marketing materials, and they offer both free versions as well as subscriptions. So if you're just looking for a free version, you can use the free version, and if you have a little bit more money to invest, you can subscribe to them. And of course, costs vary depending on what you want for your subscription. But I just want to share this information so you know about free versions that you can use. And many people may also use stock photos for websites or marketing materials to avoid having direct images of your property or residence. And so on this slide are also some websites where you can find royalty-free images that you can use in your marketing materials, on your website. And those websites are below as well. And of course, they have, content that's available for free. And if you do want to spend additional dollars, you can spend additional dollars for additional items. So how do you get these shiny new marketing materials and have your list of people to reach out to? What are your next steps? What do you do? And so we have the following recommendations for performing outreach. So attend community events. So look at things like recovery walks, recovery programs, and other events. Even though now it's November, September is recovery month. And so there are always like a ton of community recovery events in September to celebrate recovery. So get involved with these events and use them as opportunities to market your program. Sometimes they'll have tables or things that you can display information about your program and connect with other people. Also join task forces and community organizations and volunteer to do work on them. You build a really positive reputation by being willing to do the work. So again, the best marketing material you have is having a quality program and being willing to do the work. So use these as opportunities to show people what you can do. Often local task forces are shorthanded and need people to step up and volunteer. You can bring your talent for a local cause while also having people get to know you and what you do. Think about joining community organizations other than those are specifically recovery oriented. So for example, your Chamber of Commerce, your Rotary Club, others. These are all great places where you can network locally. And this is something that is not going to happen overnight, but we have certainly heard stories about people who have shown up, volunteered, and done things for years on these local committees. And then finally, after years of showing up, participating, volunteering, doing the work, that's when finally, someone else in the committee, had the light bulb moment and was like, hey, you know what, we really need to, partner with you on this program and get you funding for this program, and this is what we want to do. And then those projects came to fruition. So it's not going to be certainly something that happens overnight, you join the committee and all of a sudden you get funding, but it is a way for you to show that you're the real deal, you're committed to the community, and you're committed to the same mission that all those organizations are, and over time, it can certainly pay off. And it's important that you show up and speak up. If there are opportunities during meetings or things for you to share information about your organization, take that opportunity. And then also listen to what others have to say and offer help and solutions if you are able to help. And I also suggest setting up phone calls with potential contacts. Tell them you just want to introduce yourself and your program, as well as learn more about them and their program. You know, of course, all of us want to talk about our programs all the time. And so certainly, you know, calling someone and just saying, you know, hey, I want to talk to you about my program, that might not go over so well. But if you call them up and say, hey, I want to learn what you're doing, I want you to tell me about you, then that's a good way for you to learn about what exists in your community, as well as just open the door for that conversation. And then finally, if you have a house, host an open house. You know, invite people, invite potential partners to come in and to see your program. Offer treats and snacks. Again, if you feed them, they'll show up. So just having that event at your home can really be a good way to draw in potential partners, get them to see exactly what you're talking about and what you're doing. And if possible, you can have a resident or former resident alumni share their story about what it was like to live in the program and in the house, and you know, really give people a sense of this is what it looks like in real life. And then finally, we cannot finish our discussion on marketing without talking about social media. So as a best practice tip, use only the social media that you know you can handle. It can be a powerful tool and very, very helpful, but it can also very easily get out of hand. It is the internet after all, and you cannot control everything that's posted on the internet. And so social media accounts need to be monitored consistently and strategically. Also, social media is an enhancement for performing outreach and communications, but we've seen in research and studies that it should not replace the need for networking locally and performing local outreach. So what social media is generally good for is once people already know who you are and know your organization, like your organization, you can share information about like that open house you're having, you know, and use that to promote your open house. Or if there's another activity that you're promoting, you can do that through Facebook, but just or other social media, but just using social media to get people interested in your program, that's been shown to not be as effective, especially when you were talking about local services and things happening locally. And so if you do choose to use social media, choose platforms that would benefit you the most and have a specific goal and strategy. And of course, be prepared to invest time around the clock in monitoring the account. There are no days off on the internet. And so we just caution people who choose to use social media accounts to really think strategically about it, and then be sure to have the time and energy to invest in monitoring it appropriately. So that way, you can make sure that the social media is working for you instead of vice versa. Right, so I'm going to pause here for any questions on marketing and quality standards around marketing or marketing strategies. All right, I am not seeing any questions, but if you come up with any, feel free to type them in the question box and I will address those. I'm trying to keep an eye on that as I go. Okay, so once you've developed your marketing plan, you have many people interested, you've gotten all these applications for people who are interested in moving into your house. So what do you do next? You need to have a process for reviewing residents before they move in to determine if they're able to move in and join your community. So I have another poll question here for you just to make sure you guys are all awake this morning. All right, it's on your screen now. So this is a true or false question. Landlord tenant laws apply to recovery homes, and you can select one, true or false. I'm going to give you a couple seconds. All right, so 85% of people got this one correct. Yes, landlord-tenant laws do apply to recovery housing. All recovery homes are considered landlords, and there is just no way around this. So when you're accepting applications for housing, you must know that this person is a tenant and has the rights of a tenant. So you want to have policies and procedures in place to ensure that you have assurances that that person understands and knows that they need to uphold the recovery community, because it can be difficult to have them move out if things don't work out. You will have to find a way to either come to an agreement with them or use the legal eviction process through the court, which we all know takes a lot of time, energy, and money. And so the following are to give you strategies and ideas so that way you can have a screening process that's in place to help you assess residents to see if this is going to be a good fit and if this is something that they are ready for. We know oftentimes there are many people who are looking for housing and they're desperate and they just need a place to go right now tonight. But I would just caution certainly against rushing anything, because once that person moves in, they're a tenant. And if things don't work out, it can be very difficult to get that resident to move out, and that puts the health and safety of the other residents at risk. So you really want to have this thorough process, which really helps you balance that. You need to help someone who's seeking housing, but then you're also protecting the recovery environment for the rest of the house. And so a general tip for being a landlord, and of course, I'm not an attorney, consult your legal counsel for legal advice, but it is my understanding that anything in your policies, procedures, or agreements is unclear, then it is the resident whose interpretation that matters. So, and this is something where we've talked about it when we were talking in our previous sessions. We'll continue talking about it. This is why we always advise for all of your policies and procedures to be really well written and to be very clear. Because if you have something that can be taken two ways and it's written down and it can be interpreted two ways, any court is likely to side on the side of the person who did not write the policy. So that would be the resident. And so just an example I give is somebody who says rent payments are due once a month. It's really unclear about when exactly that means. And so if the resident pays you on April 1st, but then they don't pay you again until May 31st, technically they paid you once a month. And so it's up to you to really be clear in your policy is like your payment is due on the 1st of the month. That's when rent payments are due. And so now it's clear you can't just pay one time in April, one time in May, one time in June. You have to, it's very clear about what expectations are. And so because you are the ones drafting all of your policies and procedures, you're the one drafting your resident agreement, you have that opportunity to be very clear. And so that's why it's a good idea for you to take that opportunity and of course to seek legal advice and legal counsel from folks who are used to writing these types of legal agreements, so that way everything is written out very clearly. That again, it protects you, but it also helps you during this screening process, because residents know from the get-go what they're getting into, and they obviously have a chance to not move in or to choose not to come to your recovery home if that's not something they're willing to agree to. And so another true false poll question here for you. Let me just get that set up. So fair housing law applies to recovery housing, and so you can select true or false. And I'm just going to give you a few seconds for this poll question as well. All right, and this is great. You got it. All of you got it right. Yes, fair housing laws applies to recovery housing. And federal fair housing law protects individuals in specific classes from discrimination. And these classes include race, color, religion, sex, familial status, defined as having at least one child who's younger than 18, ancestry, disability, national origin, or military status. So those are all considered protected classes under federal fair housing law. And so you must be careful throughout your application process that you are not discriminating, either intentionally or unintentionally, against any of these protected classes. So you will notice that sex is a protected class, and many recovery homes identify as single gender. And I am not an attorney again, but it is my understanding that recovery homes are permitted to be single gender because it's appropriate for the design and use of the space. So for example, many recovery homes have shared bathrooms and common living spaces, shared bedrooms. And it is a reasonable safety expectation, for men and women to have separate housing when the expectation is that they will be sharing bathrooms, common spaces, and other common areas. So, so even though, the law says you can't discriminate based on sex, certainly, if you have these shared spaces for safety and for other purposes, you can, limit your housing to people who identify in one way. And certainly now we do have more recovery homes that are being designed to serve people of both genders, and that would take a very specific physical property and policies and procedures, so that way homes can be welcoming to individuals who identify as LGBTQ+, specifically people who are non-binary and don't feel comfortable in making that identification in order to receive housing. So certainly we want programs to really, not discriminate and to really think about how they can make their housing environments, welcoming for people, no matter what their particular gender identity is. So that way all people feel welcome and can have access to services. And so additionally, you may not offer housing for families if there are similar safety considerations. So for example, if the resident is only getting a bedroom and there's not enough physical space for a family in a bedroom, or the house just isn't set up for, for lots of children to be in the house, then it's certainly okay for you to limit your housing for, adults only because of those safety considerations. And so, however, as you can tell, this is based on the specific nature of your physical property and your program. And so therefore, it would be different from program to program. And so we, again, encourage you to seek legal advice as you develop your application to avoid potential legal issues with regards to fair housing. And the rest of what I'm going to talk about today is about the NARR standards and what we need to see from a quality standpoint. Again, I'm not an attorney. I can't give you legal advice, but we certainly hope that you would go out and seek that legal advice and certainly use what's rooted in the NARR standards. And so a discussion question, just again, to try to keep up participation in the webinar. So for all of you to type in the question box, why do we perform screening of residents before they move in? Please enter your answers into the box. All right, somebody said to make sure they're a good fit for the home. To know their history. To know where they are in their recovery. That's a great point. So you can match it. So somebody said the level of care is appropriate. So to know that you can offer the appropriate level of care. Somebody said to know they're appropriate, to know they're a good fit. And to build a rapport, yeah, to start building that relationship. Yeah. So these are all great, great suggestions, especially the one on, level of support. You may have, residents who need additional support and care that you're not equipped to provide. They might be looking for a treatment center instead of a recovery home, and having this screening process can help you get them connected to that service, and hopefully they will access those services, and when they're ready, be able to come into your recovery home. And so critical elements of your resident application process is first that you are sharing accurate information about your program so residents know beforehand what they can expect and to have a positive experience. I see someone else that dropped in here to know their expectations. That is, that's really great reason why we screen people, but also too, so they know our expectations, so they know what we're getting into as well. And so that's why we're going to share accurate information about your program. And the application process must also be clear that you are considering recovery and the person's status within recovery. And this is especially important for level 2 and level 1 homes. So there must be a process where individuals can demonstrate that they're ready to live in these types of environments as opposed to more monitored or staffed environments. Someone needs to be at a point in their recovery where they are able to, where they don't need that 24/7, staff supervision that's available in a level 3 environment. And your application process also needs to be clear and consistent. And so each resident should have to meet the same criteria in order to move in. And so it should be, clear if someone was denied, the reasons why, and that should be consistent. So that way people, again, can have appropriate expectations about eligibility for your program. And so when designing your application, take the time to set your eligibility criteria carefully. And of course, this is a point where you want to engage your leadership and other community partners who are people in recovery to assist you. The following are things that you need to consider as you develop your criteria. So a length of time in recovery, how you're going to involve other residents within the home, a connection to services and supports in the community, and that resident, or perhaps that resident's willingness to be connected to recovery supports, their understanding of the recovery environment, so they understand what they're getting into and what they're agreeing to, and then finally considering non-discrimination. And so each of these is going to look a little bit different based on the level of support that you are offering within your recovery home. And so for level 1s, we want to see that there is at least 60 days or previous successful stay in level 3 or level 2. And actually this slide is old. Just yesterday at the ORH Board of Directors, they voted to say that it is going to be a requirement that somebody have at least that requirement for staying in a level 1 home. So you should not have people live in a level 1 home if they are brand new in their recovery. They should first have that established recovery or had that previous successful stay in a level 3 or level 2 environment. And you must also have a balance of residents who have recovery experience with residents who are newer. Again, the level 1 is a peer-run environment. And we have seen way too many situations where a bunch of people very early in recovery are unmonitored, left to live in a level 1 home, and it doesn't end well for those residents or for the neighborhood. And so we want to see that time in recovery of those previous successful stays. And then a level 2, again, there's no hard and fast requirement, but we want to see that they're looking for, that what the home has set is about 30 days in recovery, and then they are able to make exceptions to that, but there has to be a process of what they're considering as an exception. So they are asking about it. They are asking, how long has this person been in recovery? And then if it is less than 30 days, what else are you looking for to make sure that they can live in a monitored environment as opposed to a fully supervised environment? And then our level 3s are generally less time in recovery. Again, it's that 24/7 supervised environment, and they're welcoming people who, who are able to live in housing, as opposed to someone who needs clinical services or a clinical setting. And then involvement of residents throughout your process is important. So in a level 1, the operator may help determine any eligibility for financial assistance based on grants or funding requirements, but it's the residents who determine who gets to move in. It is a democratic, peer-run environment. And so the residents are the ones who look at the applications for people wanting to move in, who decide based on a criteria that they've developed on who is going to be able to move into the home. So again, the operator might have a role when it comes to if there's subsidies or things available. They might look at that type of information, but then the decision about what criteria we're looking for specifically in interviewing people, that is with the residents because it's a democratically run environment. And then a level 2, residents should have some sort of role. And so at minimum, the operator must ask residents for feedback prior to accepting the resident. We know that many times people come into level 2 environments from different places, and so it might not be possible to do a full scale, interview or something of that nature with everyone in the home and the resident, depending on your program. But we have to see that there's some sort of resident involvement. They have some sort of voice. And of course, it's up to you and your organization to determine where the final decision lies. Is that with the operator or is that with the resident or with the other residents of the home? And then a level 3, the operator takes on the responsibility, and residents can bring ideas and comments to the operator to influence the policy or practice. So you might have, residents who have, who are helping you right now as you develop your screening process, and that's how they have participation in the process as a level 3. And for connection to recovery supports. So in level 3s, your residents may not be well connected yet, and that's okay because that's what you're going to be doing in a level 3 is helping them establish those basic relationships because they are very early in their recovery. And in a level 2, they should have some sort of connection, such as a sponsor, mentor, mutual aid supporter, or be willing and able to get one of those very soon after they are moving into the house. And the resident should have some sort of identified recovery pathway that the operator can support them on. So they have some sort of knowledge of kind of where they're wanting to go in their recovery. And again, they're not needing that 24/7, let's just get you established support. And then again, in level 1s, residents should have an identified support system in place that they plan to be enhanced by living in the home. And they should be at a place where they're not only ready to receive support, but give support to others on a regular basis. Because again, that level 1 is that peer environment where it's everyone in the home upholding the rules and policies and practices. And so they need to be ready to support one another. And all recovery levels should ensure that there's a solid understanding of the recovery environment. And so no matter what level you're operating, you need to make sure that people who are coming, that a part of your process is explaining to people what the recovery house is, that they're ready to commit to living in an illicit drug and alcohol-free living environment, that they're ready to commit to helping others, that they're ready to commit to living as a functionally equivalent family. So that means doing things like the house meetings and meal times and activities. They're ready and committed to participating in those. They're ready to engage in recovery planning and in taking an active role in their recovery plan. And then also they understand services you don't offer. So they should understand that you're not a treatment center, that you're not there to, that the recovery housing program is not the clinical program, that they must connect with clinical services separately. And also evaluate your application for non-discrimination. So as stated previously, you must follow federal, state, and local fair housing laws. And there are several local governments which have added additional protected classes for discrimination. So be sure to talk to your legal counsel to ensure that your application is in compliance with all of these laws. And we know that advancing equity in recovery housing goes beyond just following non-discrimination laws. Recovery homes should also consider equity in their application processes. And so some strategies for advancing equity in your application process include considering how policies and procedures regarding criminal histories are impacting those you are able to serve. So for example, if you have a very strict policy on people having a criminal history with specific types of offenses, that might be limiting, to the types of people you can enter. We know that Black and brown people are prosecuted and charged criminally way more than white people. And so having those in place, might not seem discriminatory on its face, but it may have the impact where you're excluding, more people of color than white people, depending on what the policies are. So really examine those closely. And then also examine your marketing materials to learn if they're welcoming and encouraging for people from different races, ethnicities, and backgrounds. So look at your marketing materials and make sure that you're using images and photos that show a variety of people, a variety of faces. And examine who you're performing outreach to. Are you only reaching out to specific places that serve non-diverse groups of people? So if you are really, looking to serve, a more diverse population, reach out to those organizations that also serve that population and connect with them and learn about how your program can be more welcoming and better serve, those different populations. You can also examine data in your community to see if those who are eligible to see if those who are able to serve reflects the larger community. And so with your outcomes tools, you can see, from the resident survey, things like race, ethnicity, gender identity, LGBTQ plus identity, and you can integrate that data analysis into your marketing plan and analysis that was discussed previously. So if there's a very large, community that's going unserved, you can look at your data to see, like, are we reaching that population? And if the answer is no, you can work within your community to see what you can do to do additional outreach or look at your program to become more welcoming. And then finally, connect with experts on this issue. Attend training and learn more about what you can do to advance equity. And there is an organization in Ohio, and there's a link here in the slides, to Multi-Ethnic Advocates for Cultural Competence. So they offer training, technical assistance, and support. And they recently got a grant to offer free equity audits to recovery organizations. And these audits will help you examine your organization, including your marketing materials, application process, and other aspects, to identify ways that you can further your commitment to equity and go beyond simply non-discrimination, but also to advance equity. And so we certainly recommend getting in touch with that organization, attending one of their trainings, even if you don't want to do the full audit, just so that way you can learn more about you not only avoiding discrimination, but really pushing forward and advancing equity. And so oftentimes you may feel pressure to help people who do not meet your criteria. And some people may be desperate for immediate assistance, such as individuals who are currently unsheltered or who are about to lose their housing. And remember, the eligibility criteria are being set as a way to help you ensure that you have a positive recovery environment for everyone in the home. And as a recovery home, you're not an emergency shelter. You are also not a treatment center. So if people are calling you looking for emergency shelters or treatment centers, that's not a service that you offer, and you can be very clear within your marketing and your strategies that those are not services that you offer. You're offering something different. But certainly have resources ready to help those individuals find a place that is most appropriate for them. And so keep in touch with these referral organizations so that way how to appropriately refer people to them, how to get people connected. And that individual, you might want to stay in touch with them. They might be ready for recovery housing at a later date or be eligible for your program later. So again, if someone contacts you and what they really need is treatment services, you can help get them connected and then hopefully stay in touch with them. And then maybe in 30 days, they might be a good fit for your recovery housing program and able to enter your program at that time. And so letting people know that there are other resources available and that you can connect them right away might be a very helpful way to address those issues where you might have people applying for your program, but they're not eligible for the level of support you offer, particularly for our level 2s and level 1s. And so our very first session in this series focused on the social model, and there are key ways you can implement the social model in your application and screening process. And first is to be sure that you involve residents to the highest extent possible. And so stress the importance of the recovery environment throughout the process, provide information to residents and others to ensure shared understanding, allow potential residents to interview you as well, and protect resident choice by being clear and offering referrals if the resident is not a good fit of your program. And so first, involve residents to the highest degree possible. Some suggestions for doing this are discussing your application process with residents and or recent alumni, and doing that once a year. So asking them if there's any suggestions for improvement. or even maybe every other year or at a time frame that seems reasonable. The world changes very quickly, and so having this, consistent way to evaluate, are we being as equitable as possible? Is there anything that needs to change? And involving both current residents or former residents in that process can really help you. And you can ask them if there's anything that's working or not working or anything that they think is unfair. If you do not already, find a way to have residents interview candidates when it is possible for your program. We get it. It's not going to be possible in all recovery homes or in all situations, but when it can happen, it's a good way to ensure residents are involved. And have current residents share themselves what they think is the most important thing for residents to know before making a decision about recovery housing or about moving in. And if possible, have them share this in person. If in person is not possible, you can have residents share this in writing or talk about these topics with a new resident. And so sometimes that can be a very powerful way for new residents to really understand what they're getting themselves into, as well as for residents within the home to really, feel like they're bonding with this new person and providing advice. And it's a great way to meet that social model of developing resident leadership. To have them really share their story and to say, hey, this is what I think you need to know before moving into a recovery home. This is what I think you should consider after me living here for so long. This is what I think you should consider about making this decision. And then finally, educate residents on fair housing rights. And so especially if your residents are the ones making final decisions in level 1s or level 2s, explain to them what everyone's rights are regarding fair housing and how you implement fair housing practices. So, and again, share with people that even though sometimes their intention might not be to discriminate, certain aspects and things, might lead to specific populations not being considered for housing. And so just explaining that and having that be a part of the process can be helpful as residents are actively participating in the process. Also give the resident an opportunity to interview you as well. Many of you already asked the question, do you have any questions for me? And sometimes residents might be overwhelmed or intimidated and they may not be able to think of good questions to ask. So you can have more general questions that can help residents learn information that is important as they make decisions, and also for you to help them make up their choice. So for example, ask them, what's important to you in your living environment? So that way you can hear from them and get information on if your home is going to be a good fit. What are you most excited about living in this recovery home? And also, what are you most nervous about living in the home? And hopefully through that conversation, you can, put them at ease and you really, discuss with them whether or not this is a good fit. And some strategies for ensuring shared understanding is like when you're doing this interview, just be sure to really set aside a good amount of time. Ensure the person's physical needs are met. So oftentimes people might be coming, directly from a space where, they're tired, they haven't rested, they haven't eaten in a while, they might be thirsty, they might have to go to the bathroom. So just, take that moment to be like, hey, we're gonna have a long conversation. Do you need to use the bathroom first? Do you need a drink of water? Do you need a snack? Get people to really help and focus. Have a current senior resident available for questions. Maybe they're not participating in the whole process, but bringing them in to share their story and to see if there's any questions can really help ensure understanding. If there are any documents, read them over together. This is especially important. People might not, when they're first meeting you, be willing to share that they may have trouble reading or with reading comprehension. And so reading documents together can really help anyone who might have those issues, but you do the same thing for everyone. So it's not something that they need to bring up and feel bad about. And if they have decided that the home is not for them, you can have those other resources available. So again, someone might make that decision if they know that, okay, even if I can't stay here, you're going to help me get someplace where I can go. And so as a best practice tip, have an application process form that collects all the important information, but you can use an interview process so you have the opportunity to really listen and hear the applicant. And you can fill out the form during the interview to make sure that the applications are consistent, you're making decisions appropriately, and that all potential residents are treated fairly. And another best practice tip is to be careful about collecting too much information during the application process. Collect only information that you need to make a good determination about whether that person is a good fit for your recovery home. So for example, many people have on their applications things like, please identify your race. Now, there might be very good reasons why you want someone to list what their race is for purposes of grant reporting, or like we said, for your quality improvement, to make sure you're being equitable. But at the moment when they're filling out an application, I would recommend asking that question after they've already been accepted into the program, because you don't want to ask the questions about being a protected class or anything of that nature, because if you later need to tell that person that they are not eligible for housing, you don't want them to be like, well, you asked me what my race was and you're denying my application because of what I put on my application about race. So our recommendation is to collect that information from someone, after they've been accepted into your program, so that way it's clear that that's not information that you're using to make your determination about whether or not they move in. You're only collecting information that's pertinent for you to make that determination. Are they going to be able to move into the recovery home? And then after you make that decision, then yes, you can collect demographic information and other information you might need for grant reporting and things of that nature. I know it creates kind of an extra step, but it can help protect you legally, and of course, seek your own legal guidance about those types of elements that you might want to wait to collect until after you've made that determination. And then collect emergency contact information quickly after you make your determination to accept the resident into the housing, and confirm that information with the resident. Oftentimes, some people even use the strategy of being like, I want you to call your emergency contact right now. So that way we know their phone number is working. We know it's somebody that we can reach out to, just to confirm that that information is there. And it's a quality standard for us that you collect this information, and so we recommend doing it right away so it's not forgotten. And as a reminder from our last session, language matters. I still really like this quote, so I'm reminding you of it. Words matter, they reflect reality, but they also have the power to change reality, the power to uplift and to abase. And so be sure you're using appropriate language throughout your application process. So avoid using language that promotes stigma, and instead use person-first language and language that doesn't promote stigma. And then also, again, to protect yourself, really look at your application and your marketing materials and make sure you're using housing language of units, capacity, support, move in, move out. Refer to residents as residents or tenants. Do not refer to them as clients or patients. That can really cause a lot of confusion and people thinking that you are a treatment center or something of that nature versus a recovery home, and that may cause issues for you or for the resident in the future. So really be careful about your language. And so before jumping into our final topic, I'm going to look for questions. And I did see a question earlier about somebody wondering if they could tour an existing recovery home. I'm going to ask you just to email me offline about that, and we can see if I can connect you to some existing operators who might be willing to do that for you. So please connect with me offline for that. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, but if you do have them, please pop them into the chat. So the last component of Steve's training is on appropriate drug screening policies and protocols. And so each organization is different. And once again, we advise you get legal advice on drug screening processes and sharing information about results of the screenings. Laws apply to you differently depending on your organization structure and how exactly you use the information, if you partner with treatment centers or other organizations that fall under HIPAA or 42 CFR Part 2. So with regards to the NARR standards, a drug and alcohol screening policy must be supportive of an illicit drug and alcohol-free living environment. And level 3 and level 2 homes must have some sort of policy that allows residents to participate in screenings on a regular basis, at minimum, upon suspicion of use. And level 1 homes must have strategies in place for ensuring a drug and alcohol-free living environment and performing screenings upon suspicion of use. And in general, the purpose of the screenings is based on the needs of the resident, not for the purpose of seeking reimbursement or payment. So what we want to see is that it's consistent across all residents. And so if residents are randomly tested once throughout the week, then that is what is for everyone. It is not, they are not tested more often because, you know, their treatment center says, well, they're eligible for 2 tests a week, so we're going to test twice a week. I mean, again, that's a decision made by the treatment center, but for you, you set your policy on what you feel is needed to maintain that drug and alcohol-free living environment for your population, and that's what everyone must do. Now, if they're able to go to, and they get that done at the treatment center, and then they share the results with you, that's fine. But again, seek legal advice. You do not want to get in trouble for kickbacks or anything of that nature, and so money certainly should not be exchanging hands for that to protect yourselves legally. But make sure you have all the appropriate releases of information with any treatment centers or healthcare providers. And so your written drug screening policy must address when drug screenings are performed, how tests are paid for, who information will be shared with, what will happen if a test is refused, and what will happen depending on test results. And there are no requirements for specific types of tests or different types of panels. That again is up to you and your target population of what you feel is needed, but they must be appropriate for the resident being served. And the implementation of a screening protocol may vary based on level of support. So there's again no minimum requirement for the number of screens or how often they need to be done, but it is up to you to establish that to ensure the drug and alcohol-free living environment. And as you establish your policy, consider, you'll need to screen residents upon move-in to make sure that they're substance-free. That's certainly something you want to consider. And for some organizations, you may be having residents move in directly from treatment or from another source where they've been recently screened. So think about that. And if you can get that release of information, that might be sufficient instead of performing an additional screen when they move in. And then for others, the resident may not have had such screening or has lived in another location after leaving treatment. And so screening that person prior to moving in can ensure that you are able to verify that they're meeting your requirements and you can document that they're meeting your criteria prior to moving in. And you must also consider, ongoing regular screenings. In level 3 homes, residents are generally screened more often, and recovery homes can work with treatment providers to let them know their requirements, and then work with the treatment providers to have residents screened and shared information. But again, that's you working with their particular treatment provider. But if a person, you might need to perform screenings, if you don't have that relationship with the treatment provider or you can't get that release of information, you would need to then perform screenings for that person just to make sure that they are meeting the drug and alcohol-free living requirements. And in level 2 and level 1 homes, they may also screen residents, randomly. And of course, everyone is required to have a policy for screening based on suspicion. And so consider your plans for random screenings. How are you going to select which residents are randomly selected? How will the process work? And for policies that require screening based on suspicion, be clear to ensure fairness and consistency among residents. And many recovery homes also implement policies where residents are required to be screened after they return to the home from an overnight pass or something of that nature. So if they spend the night away from the home, they are screened upon their return, again, just for that accountability and to ensure that drug and alcohol-free living environment. Your policy also needs to be clear about how tests are paid for. And so for many recovery homes, the cost of all operator required screens is included in the resident fee, and there's no additional charge. And this is certainly the simplest way and saves you the process of having to collect fees and invoice residents for fees. It's also the most fair, as many residents may be low income and not have enough money for additional screenings, and they may have a refusal of a screening simply because they could not afford it, and that's why they refuse to screen. And so having that cost built into your fees makes things very fair, instead of residents having to think, oh no, I've got to come up with X amount of dollars in order to pay for a screen. Then also consider a situation where you require to screen a resident who returns from an overnight visit. If they do not have the money for the screen upon return, they will not be able to have an overnight visit, and that's, again, not really fair. So that's why, we recommend building the cost into your resident fees, but it is up to you, and it's not a violation of the standard if you charge separately, as long as it is crystal clear in your resident agreement, as well as in your screening process, how much they're charged for and how often they'll be screened. And so to protect your organization, be clear about who pays the cost for confirmation screenings. So if a resident disagrees with the results and wants another screen, many homes may pay for the first confirmation, but not the second or the third, or they may say it's up to you to pay for the confirmation screening, and that expense is borne by you. And so some homes require residents to pay for any confirmation screening. And so think about what policy works best for your organization, and again, be clear about it. So you have a lot of flexibility here, depending on your level of support, your target population, how your program is set up, the relationships you have with different treatment centers. There's a lot of flexibility for you here. What we need to see is that screening happens. The purpose of screening is to maintain a drug and alcohol-free living environment, that you have good documentation, and that your policy is crystal clear on what your expectations are for residents, and if there are any costs associated with that, you're clear with that for residents. And then finally, be sure to have appropriate releases of information with any treatment providers, parole officers, and others that you plan to share results with. We are covering privacy and confidentiality in a future session, but again, be sure to get those releases reviewed by legal experts and have residents sign them. And again, in your policy, you need to be clear about what happens if a resident refuses screening. So going back to our previous slide, where you have the opportunity to make things clear. And so, you might think, well, it's assumed that if you refuse a screening, that counts as the same thing as a screening that reveals substance use, right? So you might think that, but it's important that you put it in writing, and it's important that it's included in your policy. So again, things are crystal clear and there is no question. And many homes are clear with their residents that refusal to participate will be treated as a result that reveals substance use, and that appropriate action will be taken. And it's important, again, to be crystal clear. So, and also, again, this is an opportunity for discussion. And so you can always allow for an opportunity for honesty and to be open and honest. And so, again, if residents are declining a screen, maybe they can say something like, well, that's because this happened, and they can share with you what happened, and you can come up with a plan on how to deal with that situation together, and to really create that culture where it's okay for residents to be open and honest with you. And then finally, it's important to keep good documentation on records of your screening. So each resident should have an appropriate file that contains results, and you're required to document your responses to any screens that are refused or reveal positive substance use. And remember, NARR standards do not require that residents be evicted, but you must maintain evidence that you address the situation immediately and appropriately. And so we'll have a future session that will provide more details on best practice guidance as far as that particular situation where a resident has a disruption in their recovery. But for now, when it comes to documenting screenings, we want to see that if there is a result that reveals substance use, you have documentation that says, here's how we dealt with the situation. So that way, if we at ORH get a concern that says, hey, there's people using substances in the house, this person used a substance and nothing happened, we can review that concern, and you would have the documentation ready to be like, well, yes, there was an instance of substance use, but here's everything that we did to respond to it. And not everyone might know about it, but you would have that documentation ready, so that way we can review that concern, and we can know that you did address it immediately and appropriately in accordance with all of your policies and practices. All right, and so we have just a couple more minutes left for any final questions. Does anyone have any final questions on today's topic? Okay, I am not seeing any questions. And so for your homework assignment, so again, this is a part of the Recovery Housing Institute. If you complete all of these homework assignments, you will have all of your documents, policies, and procedures ready to go for your application. And you will also have a good understanding of what the expectations are for your program interview, your dwelling review for ORH certification. And so I would encourage you to create your resident application, process, that written process of what your criteria is and what you're going to do and your application form. And also create your written drug screening policy. And we have the Recovery Housing Development Guidebook in the handout section for you to use for more information. And so you can look at that and use that. And you can send them to my email address there. I will take a look at those. I'll provide you with any feedback to see if they meet the NARR minimum standards. So you can have that information prior to submitting your application. And if you want extra credit, you can complete the SBA marketing plan and analysis for your organization. So, so that is your homework assignment. Again, it's optional. You don't have to do it, but I highly encourage you to if you're planning on seeking ORH certification. All right, and I'm not seeing any other final questions or comments. Again, this is my email here on the screen. Please fill out the survey that will be emailed to you after the webinar. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you on other trainings in the series. Good afternoon, everyone.